How y'all doing? Today I'm going to cover a book that's been on my shelf for a number of years. It is Michael Crichton's Eaters of the Dead. It was a book written by 1976 and was also adapted and filmed by 1999, The 13th Warrior, starring Antonia Banderes. Alright, so here I'm going to just let you know we'll be spoiling both the book and the movie here to make comparisons. So here we are. Let's discuss the story of what it's about. The story is told entirely in first person through the main character, Ahmed ibn Fadlan. He's an Arab emissary from Baghdad, being sent there because of a bit of a scandal between him, a rich old merchant, and his wife. So as he's going to be sent as emissary for the Vulgar Caliphate up north, and along his way he comes across a Viking settlement where he gets to witness Vikings for the first time. He sees their habits. Mostly he finds them disgusting, or not quite understanding their ways, like why they're so afraid of the mist as they are. But he gets to witness in detail a Viking funeral and the details involved in that. But after the funeral, a messenger from a king up north, this is the king's son, and he tells the chieftain there, Bolvad, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, I never quite hear it right in both the movie and how it's pronounced in the book, but I digress. He's telling him that there is a great danger up north of where he's from. And the boy says you need a hero to help solve this problem. So they bring in the angel of death, this old woman, who rolls the bones, and she tells him there needs to be 13 warriors, including Bolvad. So Bolvad and 11 others, volunteer to do this, and they mentioned, the 13th one must be no Northman. And of course, the only one in that room that will fit that is Ahmed. The 13th, they actually do explain this part. The 13th one is a reference to moons, and the 13th moon has to do with something mystical, magical, or foreign. Since Ahmed is from another land, he is a foreigner, he's the 13th warrior. So, beyond his choice, he's now one of the 13 heroes to travel north to where this problem is. So now Ahmed travels with these 12 warriors up north, and through their travels through both boat and through horseback, they come across the Great Hall of Hurat, ruled by King Hrothgar. He tells them that there's this great enemy that they've had a problem with a long time called the Wendel. They have sent many men to try and stop them, but they never come back from their journeys, so that's why they need Bolvad to help out. Now, Ahmed is, watching all their customs, trying to, understand what they can with Herger as his interpreter, and so through a night attack, through then the next couple of nights they build up defenses and start bringing up another wave of attacks. Now Bolvad has to seek advice from some dwarves who equipped him with a rope and some special daggers to go down there to kill the mother, and to face the Wendel one last final battle. That sums it up. This sounds familiar? This is an attempt to make a somewhat realistic approach of Beowulf. If you know the story of Beowulf, you see where this is going at. So I summarize this story here because now here I'm going to compare both the book and the movie, and also talk about the Beowulf legend in between. So again, spoilers from here on out. Now many of you have probably already watched the 13th Warrior, and many of you are probably fans of it. I know I am. And there are some differences, but it is still a faithful, respectable adaptation. But there's plenty of differences, but not too much, except for the later half. Let's explore some of these. Let's see. So, one of the things about Ahmed in the movie is that he gets through the language barrier through a scene that as he's traveling through them throughout their many days and a week's travel, however long it takes, never says, he was only able to talk with Herger. Even in the movie, it wasn't even the case. Herger speaks to his friend who was able to speak Latin, and therefore, come of a three-way, translation there. In the movie, Ahmed sits and listens to them quietly, and he later just picks up the language on his own. He finds out the logic and all that, and what have you. So some people like it, some people hate it. But that's just the movie's way of making sure we don't have to go through the whole language barrier. In the book, Ahmed already is an educated individual who knows Latin, so most of the book, while he does pick up a little bit of the language to the point where near the end he can be told, if having a slow conversation with him, he can pick up and tell him what, have a he could talk with them. But most of the time, he talks with Herger, or Herger. Sorry if I don't know which way to pronounce that or how it's done in the Scandinavian way. But, it's all this time, whenever Ahmed trying to figure out something, Herger would translate him. Or he has a question, he asks him, much to Herger's annoyance there throughout most of the book. He used to describe him as a stupid Arab that doesn't know anything about the world. So that's how it is. In the movie, Ahmed has an expert horseback rider who could do leaps. They poke fun of him because he brings along a horse that's smaller than the Vikings horses. So they say only an Arab will bring a dog to war. Truth of the matter is, Ahmed, traveled originally on camel. Then when he joins them, some of it's on boat, some of it's on foot, and the horses are provided to them. So he just simply knows how to ride. Another scene in the movie where he takes a Viking sword and grinds it down to a scimitar for use. He doesn't do that at all. He's just an ambassador. Doesn't have any special skills, that's beyond them and what have you. He is a fish out of water, beyond his experience around people whose ways he'll never truly understand. He tried following his practices of Islam, but, they either kind of laugh at him as for beliefs or the way he sort of thinks. They even thought that his prayer towards the Mecca is bringing him bad luck. He shows them that he could write, and he writes down, a passage of the Quran, but they also have a superstition that they don't want their names written. Things like that. There's a scene in the movie they got directly from the book, almost exactly, except for a small deal of leather on the floor. And that it is that Hrothgar's son is trying to bring the people of the hall against Bovide. And, he's a sly fox and all that. So once Ahmed gets his information from another Norseman who lives there, who knew enough Latin to communicate with, and he tells him this. He tells it to Bovide and Herger, and they decide to attack the one of I think it was Ragnar or Rognar, I forget his name, but he's one working with Prince Wiglaf. So Herger starts working with him, starts chiding him a bit by throwing earth at him, eventually gets into a fight. They have a duel involving 3 sword and 3 shields. They try to bust up the shields, and once they get past 3 shields and deal the final cut, it's to the death. The scene between the book and the movie is almost exact, and for the same reasons that they have. So that's a nice little thing. As I said, it's a very respectable adaptation. Now, one of the major changes involves Bovide trying to gain information about the Wendel and how to stop them. First, they go out into this, what they call as a desert, and they go to this one village, but the Wendel aren't there. They knew they were going to come, so they left that one, and they got to see the bones that are piled there from the people. See, they go out raiding because they eat people. They're cannibals. They eat the dead, and so they go back. In the movie, they are introduced to this old woman who tells them, where they are. She looks at this little statues that they have, that's based on a real little sculpture that we found in Central Europe at the time. And she tells them that, did you seek him into earth, you must kill the mother and the one who has the horns of power. The book does not have the one with the horns of power, but does talk about the mother. So now in the book, I described that they did not talk to an old woman, they talked to dwarves, actual dwarves. I think the reason they changed that over is the whole premise of this is to have a realistic story that could derive through oral tradition into the Beowulf legend that we're familiar with. So, now, in the movie, they go in through the main Wendel camp. They find their cave and sneak in, and through traveling in there, they have a little adventure involving cliffsides. Slaughter a few. Eventually, Beowulf gets the mother, and they escape underneath the an underwater passage which leads out into the ocean to the Thunder Cliffs. In the book, they went the opposite. They can't. That small group, which already had been diminished in number from their previous attacks, they can't do it head on into the main cave. So what they had to do is they used the seal rope given to them by the dwarves. They go through the cliffs and climb all the way down. Ahmed is scared of heights, but he goes with it. There's once they land into the water, there's an underground cave, which they, after a little diving and struggle, They go inside the Wendell caves, where they do find the mother, and eventually kill her. Of course, Bolvide is poisoned by this. So, and they went out, and since they killed the mother, that demoralized the Wendell in the cave, so they ran out, giving them clear escape, leaving them to the final battle. Another thing about the Wendell is that the book describes him as basically as one of the last groups of Neanderthals. The movie does portray them as having bare heads and all that, they eat dead and everything, but they just sort of see him as sort of primitive man. Here they describe him as the physical features of that Neanderthal, and they also wear bare heads and all that. They have nicely crafted stone axes and everything. So that's who they're up against. So, and you can see the word Wendell with Grendel. The whole group of the Wendell, could be later on interpreted as one giant creature called Grendel. And of course, the mother is the mother of them all. So they simplified it in that sense. So it's just wonderful things. Other things about the book that that shows hints of what legend will show later on. During the first, I think the second or first battle or the second battle, I forget which offhand, they found an arm of the Wendell, and they hanged that up on up in the hall. Same thing in Beowulf. They did that when Grendel was defeated the first time. Let's see. Oh shoot! Of course, the Wiglaf of the son of Hrothgar, his confrontation with Bolvide. There was a scene in Beowulf about that Bolvide has with the son or one of the other characters in there about how brave he is and everything. All right, so yeah, you find all the parallels and what have you. Not to mention, there's also Bolvide, who right before they visit Hrothgar, Bolvide visited his home, only to find it destroyed by that and his family destroyed by the Wendell. So he picks up his huge Viking sword called Running, which could be Hrunting in the Beowulf stories, given him by another means. So yeah, there's a whole lot of the parallels are done on purpose, and let me explain why. The end of the book, Michael Crichton writes a factual note on Eaters of the Dead. And I'll read the first paragraph here. Eaters of the Dead was conceived on a dare. In 1974, my friend Kurt Valenson proposed to teach a college course he called The Great Bores. The course would include all the texts that were supposed to be crucial to Western civilization, but which were, in truth, no longer read willingly by anyone because they were so tedious. Kurt said that the first of the Great Bores he would address was the epic poem Beowulf. I disagreed. I argued that Beowulf was a dramatic, exciting story, and that I can prove it. I went home and immediately began making notes for the novel. So, and he goes on further his process of who he had to use as how he sets it up. The whole premise of Eaters of the Dead was a sort of I don't know if the right word is mockumentary in a sense. How those work. It's sort of we know Beowulf, and underneath. Even though it's a fantastical story with a giant monster, the mother, and then later a dragon, which is not addressed in here, all legends, as we know, may have some basis of truth. So what would it be? Well, we don't have that. So Michael Crichton was attempting to do that, write a fictional story written realistically enough that when it was told, that story can be translated later on through oral traditions into Beowulf. The question is, how is he going to do that with something that's real in the real world here? So he chose Ahmed ibn Fadlan, who was an actual person that existed from Baghdad, who was an emissary, who, through his writings and personal accounts, he talks about the Vikings he's met. And he talks about the funeral that he's seen. He describes the Vikings and how powerful they were. He sees their customs, usually he's pretty disgusted by it, and what have you. But Crichton took that and then extended upon it. And throughout the book, it is written like it was a scholarly work with a lot of footnotes about the customs or how things are translated, because it's written in the first person, so it's written as a translation. And if and when it describes something in the story, there may be a footnote that says, okay, scholars, read this and they see this and they translate to this, but it could also mean this and this. But also talk about other customs. He even has a sources page to where he talks about the primary sources, secondary sources, and I believe all these are real books. I think I have one of them, the Vikings, that he mentions here. So, but again, just to sort of remind you not to take it too seriously, one of them is the Necronomicon by Abdul Azhared, edited by H.P. Lovecraft. So, I don't recall reading any footnotes in that throughout the book, but again, can't take it too seriously. So there it is. So basically, yeah, it's just using Ahmed Ibn Allan as a viewpoint character to create a fictional story that is that just tells a possible realistic approach to where that derives the story of Beowulf. It's entertaining as all get out. The movie here is great. More people have watched this. I remember this being advertised for theaters, and even though a friend of mine and I was offered by his mother to watch it in theaters one time, we declined because I don't know about something was strange when I watched it. Hercules and Xena was kind of big, and I looked at that and I thought the production value was the same thing. I was wrong, because in November that this came out in video back in '99, my father brought it over. We watched it. And we all loved it. We thought it was, my father understood that it was Beowulf immediately, by the story structure, and I later found out that it was, Ahmed was based on a real character. Now, of course, we knew that was based on the story of Michael Crichton. Funny thing is, my great uncle, who got me into a lot of reading fantasy and and science fiction, mostly fantasy and sorcery and all that, he told me that he read the book first, then watched the movie, found the movie boring. A friend of mine who watched the movie and then read the book found the book boring. So, based on things like that, it's one of those cases you have to try it out yourself. Now, if you like the movie, the only thing that may draw you back is the fact that the dialogue in the movie between Ahmed and the other Vikings that his companions, hey, when you die, can I get back to my daughter? Most of the conversations in the book is between Herger and Ahmed, and sometimes the Bolvide. Ekgal is just described, because he's a lieutenant. There's a few scenes he does as Ahmed describes. The others are given names and are just there for the fight, where there's more interaction with that. So there's that experience you get in the movie. It's a bit more drier comparison in the book, but the good news is this little paperback here, the story itself is only like a little over 250 pages, not including the appendices, which are not that much. It's only about another 20 pages worth. It is fast to me. I mean, I read about, in my own, just reading at work, I was able to read about, give or take 50 pages on average. So it won't take you this long to read. And so the movie, again, is respectful to the book and its adaptation, despite the trouble production they had about this. It's amazing we got anything decent at all. So again, you can have both of these. And while we all know the saying when it comes to books to movies, we all have the saying, and I'm included, I'm sure you have, where it says, the book is better. I would argue that you can take these both and enjoy them both, despite the differences. The book is good, the movie is good, the changes are understandable. They don't have the dwarves, they had the old woman. Makes sense, because that's kind of be hard to depict without showing a bit of a fantasy world. Anything that's described as fantastic after that, like the sea monsters, Ahmed and the North Sea and the oceans, are just most likely whales. They talk about their superstitions and conflicts of their beliefs, but again, the opposite direction of how they attack the window and everything. But the interesting, you can get over that, I think. You can have them both and enjoy them both. I mean, after all, we've done that with Lord of the Rings, and they have much more changes. And I think they did a better job giving the Norse companions more character in the movie than the Hobbit trilogy that they did, some time back. Nothing can be perfect. But with that said, Eaters of the Dead by Michael Crichton. It's interesting, ever since Jurassic Park, I started finding out all this guy's work and what all he's done. And look this guy up, and there is stuff that he has produced that made both book and in movies that you were probably aware of but not realize its connection to this. The reason why they probably adapted this is because of the success of Jurassic Park. At the time, it was the highest grossing movie ever. So naturally, they want to adapt his other books after that. Sphere with Dustin Hoffman and Samuel L. Jackson. And of course, there was Rising Sun with Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery, based on his book. We had one of the movies I watched in the 80s written by Michael Crichton was Runaway with Tom Selleck and Gene Simmons. Yes, Gene Simmons of Kiss. It's a story that takes place about a cop who works in the division that attacks runaway or malfunctioning robots. So there was so yeah, this guy's written a lot of stuff. Andromeda Strain is a classic one from way back when. Let's see. The Great Train Robbery. And it was wholesome. Just look at Michael Crichton. He has his own website, and look at his resume, and you'd be surprised. Oh, I've heard of this and heard. Oh, I didn't know he was involved in that. You'd be surprised over this. This is one of those. He's one of those writers that you find all the time in the grocery stores and drugstores, and it's one of those type of novels. But doesn't mean it's not good. That's the thing. It's a fast-paced read. If you like Viking adventures, give this one a go. If you like 13th Warrior, add this to your collection, and you can see how respectful it is. So yeah, Eaters of the Dead by Michael Crichton. Thank you all for watching. Have a nice day.